This very classroom used to be called the Dearman class venue. Andy Dearman, I'm so pleased, has agreed to teach this class with me. We are both friends of Coco and Sam Harrell. It is Coco who introduced this topic to me and caused me to become fascinated with it. It is Andy who invited me in to teach here 42 years ago. All right, gotta have a catchy title: Missionaries, Martyrs, and the Hidden Christians of Japan. It really is a three-part story. It's the story of how Christianity came to Japan, how it got run out of Japan, and nevertheless, how it persevered in Japan. I'm going to give you in a moment the outline. We're doing this for 2 weeks. Dear Mike Irvin, who does such a good job publishing this stuff, said, "Where are you going to end in week 1?" I said, "I don't know." Just play it. In fact, it said, play it by ear was our communication. So here we go. As long as it does what it's supposed to. It did. All right, here are the topics. Christianity comes to Japan, and then Andy's going to talk to us about what faith traditions did the missionaries encounter? What did they do in Japan when Christianity arrived? Then I'm going to come back and talk about the expulsion and persecution of Christians, which is some of the nastiest stuff. I should give a trigger warning before we do that class. Some of the nastiest stuff you will encounter, I'm afraid. And then we have, after the expulsion, eventually Japan opens itself up again in the mid-19th century, and we find that there have been Christians continuing to practice their faith, notwithstanding the persecution and the absence of any pastoral leadership. They've been doing it on their own. And then finally, Andy's going to close with what does Christianity look like in Japan today?
I'm sorry, would you repeat what you said about item number 4?
4. Okay. We're going to see that by the mid-17th century, people have been forced to give up their faith by terrible means. Past priests have been run out. Priests have been executed. Priests have been tortured so that they would make a public display of their recantation of the Christian faith. And so it is not something you can do publicly. But then for the next 200 years, we find, well, when Japan opens back up in the mid-19th century, they discover, the priests that come back, discover that there have been Christians practicing their faith for those 200 years in secret and with no priest to lead them. And no Bible, by the way. That's my last class. You're going to get some interesting stuff. They did have some scriptures that they had put together, and you will see, just to give you a preview, can you imagine you've been practicing the Christian faith for over 200 years without any pastoral guidance, just working off memory of what you had been taught? You're going to remember things like the Lord's Prayer, but some of your Bible stories are going to get a little confused. Coco's not, because you have a merger of what they remembered learning from the priests and the stories that they grew up in with their native traditions, particularly Buddhism. And so we're going to look at some passages from there are only 9 copies that they've found of their scripture. And it is, you can see exactly why Paul did what he did. He would start in a town, he would grow that church, and he would move on. But he'd have to write them later and say, you're kind of going off the rails here a little bit. You need to fix this, you foolish Galatians, for example. They didn't have that. And so you'll see what happens. Okay. Our story begins with a guy you may have heard of, Vasco da Gama. He is a Portuguese explorer. He makes it around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa and gets eventually to India. And the Portuguese establish a home base in Goa, which will not only be their home base for their colonization, but also for their evangelization. So here's what happens. They are trying to move on from India to China, but we have a bad storm, and Portuguese merchants are driven over to this island of Tanegashima in Japan. It's Japan's 6th largest island. There you have a cute map that I found with Tanegashima circled. That's 1543. Then you have the most famous person in this story of the Western tradition. We'll have some famous Japanese, but Francis Xavier, who is known as the Apostle of the East. He accompanied the Portuguese ships to Goa in India, and that is the Catholic base for evangelizing Asia. Well, there also is another hero to this story, Yajiro. He killed somebody and had to run away to Kagoshima on a Portuguese ship. He's fleeing from the law. He spends time with the Portuguese, he learns it, and he shows interest in their religion. Got to start somewhere. So he travels with 2 companions from Macau to Malacca to track down Xavier, because he's heard he's the guy he needs to talk to if he wants to know more about the Christian faith. So we're going to have a meeting of Yajiro, who sometimes appears in the literature as Anjiro, and Francis Xavier. And there they are together, memorialized in statues. Xavier was impressed with our Japanese friend Yajiro, and he writes, "If all the Japanese are as eager to know as is Yajiro, it seems to me that this race is the most curious of all the peoples that have been discovered." And he encourages Yajiro and his companions to go to Goa for further study. And they do. And they become the first ever Japanese Christians when they are baptized in the cathedral in Goa, in India. The first mission led by Francis Xavier goes to Kagoshima. And he says, if we knew how to speak Japanese, I have no doubt in believing that many would become Christians. Of course, this is always a barrier. Yajiro translated, but not surprisingly, much was lost in the translation. The nearest equivalent that our friend Yajiro could come up with for God was the Buddhist deity Danichi. People assumed that they were just preaching a heretical sect of Buddhism, and that didn't go over too well. So the Portuguese decided, we're just going to keep our Latin or Portuguese words for new concepts in the Christian faith that they wouldn't otherwise be familiar with. Yajiro gets his audience for Xavier with a local feudal lord. At this time, Japan is not unified under a single strong emperor. You have feudal lords, known as daimyo. Did I say that right? Daimyo? And they're the key to getting the word spread for a couple of reasons. They're important. If you get them, it's like when we're in our prison ministry, if you get the baddest guy in the prison to say, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and start to act like it, a lot of other people follow along. Well, if you get the daimyo to do that, same thing. Plus, and I don't know that the biggest, baddest guy in prison does this, but the daimyo can also force all of the people living on his lands to become Christians. So he had a little extra incentive. Now, we're going to see this, that the reason, I think primarily, that the Japanese lords are attracted to the Portuguese and their Christianity is the Portuguese and the goods that they have to trade. All right, so Lord Takahisa is eager for good relations with the Portuguese and the trade possibilities that come with those relations. And so he's happy to receive Xavier. One of his vassals had heard Xavier preach and invited Xavier to the castle where many conversions were made. And you're going to see many totals out at the bottom to about 100. That's after 10 months when Takahashi, who I think didn't get the trade relations he was looking for, forbids conversions on pain of death. He had been lobbied by Buddhist priests against the Christians, and as I said, the hoped for trade had not materialized. So we cap out, say, at about 100 conversions in 1549. Now Xavier travels by boat to a place called Hirado, where a captain fired a cannon in salute. And the local lord thought that was pretty cool, that he was being saluted by a Portuguese ship. And so he gives Xavier a license to preach, and we get about another 100 converts made. Now, this is Yamaguchi. Xavier begins, he said, okay, now what I really need to do is visit the guy who is the biggest of the feudal lords and the capital city of Kyoto. So he stops in Yamaguchi, which was known as the Kyoto of the West. There's a small band of Christians that he has with him who preach in the streets. They get mixed reactions. They receive invitations to homes of curious noblemen, including the local daimyo, which is always a good thing. However, he walks out, the Yoshitaka, after a denunciation of sodomy, probably the story of Sodom and Gomorrah or the Levite and his concubine or whatever, but he didn't like hearing about that was not something you could do. And along with idolatry and infanticide, these were three great sins that the missionaries harped on. So Xavier gets to Kyoto, and here is the church that memorializes his time there and his work in Kyoto.
That's a pretty church.
Well, yes, and it was not from his time. It was after Japan reopens in the 19th century. It is. The city was largely in ruins. The lords are fighting with each other. You have essentially a civil war. The guy that he wanted to meet that was at least characterized as the king of Japan, he'd been chased out of Kyoto. And so Xavier has this to say: when we saw that the land did not have the peace there for preaching the law of God, we returned. His visit to Kyoto lasted just 11 days and is described as a total failure. So we're going to try again. Back to Yamaguchi. Here are the lessons that Xavier had learned so far. One, it's really important to get the support of the regional lords because you don't have a president or an emperor. And now he comes with official letters from the governor of Goa, the Portuguese colony in India, because now he's representing a foreign power. And that's a big deal, both for relationship purposes, trade purposes. So yeah, I'm not just a missionary, I'm an official of the great Portugal. He also learned that dressing down was not what they appreciated. Dressing up was what they appreciated. So he puts himself in a splendid silk robe instead of one that's kind of worn out. And then you bring gifts. They appreciate the gifts. A mechanical clock and an elaborately carved musket were big hits. So Yoshitaka was impressed and granted a license to preach and premises in an abandoned temple. He gave him a spot. There is Xavier in Yamaguchi in a park. He lived and preached there for 4 months. And he says, I think I could truly say that in my life I have never received so much joy and spiritual satisfaction. After 2¼ years in Japan, he returns to Goa, and now we've got, and these are obviously very rough estimates, about 1,000 converts. Not a whole lot after all that time. He writes to Ignatius Loyola, Japan is the only country yet discovered in these regions where there is hope of Christianity permanently taking root. we're going to see it really doesn't. The first Christmas in Japan was celebrated after Xavier had left by his father, his successor, Father de Torres. So 1552, we have a Christmas celebration. Here is the legacy of St. Francis Xavier. He did, in fact, shape the mission to Japan. He wanted only missionaries of the highest quality to be sent. He made efforts to adapt to local ways and to be culturally sensitive. Those of you familiar with missions to China, same thing. That was learned early on, that you want to try to blend in with the locals. He died from disease in 1552 on a small Chinese island that he'd gone to intercede on behalf of some prisoners that had been Portuguese prisoners that had been taken by the Chinese. In 1622, he was canonized by the Catholic Church as a saint, and he is known as the patron saint of missionaries. And there is an icon pictured for you. After he's gone, it's tough going. By 1559, another, 7 years or so, we're up to 6,000 converts, but we only have 6 missionaries, which is going to make it tough sledding. And as we've mentioned before, how well you do kind of depends on the patronage of the feudal lords. Are they with you or are they against you? And because Christian groups were fairly isolated, there are not many of them, they're not worshiping in the center of town, it's hard to do your job as a missionary. And some of the Christian teachings really confuse them. And you can imagine if this is not what you grew up with, so this notion of an eternal soul, well, they wanted to know what that looked like. And I mean, when I was teaching 9th grade biblical studies, I always got the question when we were talking about the resurrection. Well, what will I look like when I come back? Am I going to be a cool teenager? I'm going to be some old guy? What am I going to look like?
And your answer was?
Whatever it is, you'll be happier than you've ever been before. It's the same answer I give, will my dog be in heaven? Well, either that or something better. Okay. They were not real sold on the concept of an eternal hell because Buddhism promised the possibility of rebirth into a better life. Their culture was one of ancestor worship, and so the thought that family members might be eternally damned was just something they could not accept. But now we have a major breakthrough, and guess what happens? They get a local lord to buy into what they're doing. Omura Sumitada, pretty well known in this story, and there he is. Once again, what gets him on board? The Jesuits promised to bring Portuguese ships into his harbor with guns and cannon, which he was happy to have. Other lords, daimyos, followed suit, and you got 82 baptized of the lords, not just people, but the feudal lords between 1563 and 1620. And here is a sentence that from a book that if you are wanting to read more about what we're talking about, this is as good as I've found. In Search of Japan's Hidden Christians by John Dougal. He writes, it's been said that whereas the missionaries used trade to get the Japanese to heaven, the Japanese used heaven as a way to get trade. It works both ways, friends. And here we have it. Our friend Sumitada, we find, makes a really good apostle by forcing the conversions on his entire domain. And here we're going to see is a lasting problem. Breadth defeated depth. The emphasis was on rapid growth, get as many converts as we can, rather than a deep understanding of the faith. And by 1579, though, we have about 100,000. So a major breakthrough with Omura Sumitada. And you find this in a lot of evangelistic ministries. You know, you get somebody to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they say a prayer, and then you move on. Which is why I'm so pleased with the prison ministry that I work with, God of Hope, where Robert Durow was here a couple weeks ago to speak. It's a discipleship ministry. We teach them now not just for 6 months, but for a year in classes like Fundamentals of the Faith. And so depth is always better. You got to start somewhere, but it's great to keep the mission, the great commission is to make disciples of all nations, not just converts. Now we have an even bigger breakthrough with Oda Nobunaga. Again, they're seeking favor from the top down, and he was the first to unify Japan.
Now, where is he from?
I don't know, Japan. I don't know where Oda Nobunaga is, but he was one of the Japanese feudal lords who ended up being bigger and better and stronger than the rest of them. He defeated his rivals, and he was not nice about it. So again, being good to the missionaries stood him in good stead with the Portuguese traders, but he was also impressed with their lifestyle because he saw among the Buddhist priests hypocrisy. They were living large when they were preaching austerity, but he saw the Jesuits actually practicing it. And he allowed the missionaries to set up a school for children of noblemen called the Seminario. The Christian cause progressed by leaps and bounds under Nobunaga, though he himself never converted. So you can tell kind of what his play in all this is. An historian named George Sansom writes, "It became almost fashionable in some quarters to be baptized and carry a rosary." And a man, priest Father Organtino, who ran that seminario, claimed Japan would be Christian in another 30 years if more priests were available. Not going to happen. Not for the least of which Nobunaga was betrayed by one of his generals and killed himself after he had been wounded in an assassination attempt. So, that's where we're going to leave you at kind of the high point, but with foreshadowing of low points to come. Andy, you ready?
Okay, friends, delight to be here with you. You're welcome to ask questions, and I just need to say, in all honesty, I'll be welcome to say I don't know, because I'm not an expert on Shintoism or Buddhism or Confucianism, but those are the three building blocks of the religion and culture of Japan. And so, as Chris has rightly pointed out, we need to know at least something about that to know what is the culture that was encountered by the missionaries, and it is the building block in many ways of current Japanese culture. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these, and I'll have a few pictures of current practice so that you will see that. But current practice, as is typically the case in religions and cultures, is quite traditional. And so it will have elements to it that have been there forever. Okay, so Shintoism is the indigenous religion of Japan. Think broadly with me, friends, of any culture, and there are some things that we call indigenous. As long as there have been people there, this is the way they thought about matters. This is the way they practiced their life together. So Shinto, or Shintoism, is the term used for the indigenous religion of Japan. I'll have a few comments about it in a moment. And then the second bullet point, quite important for the history of world religions and certainly of the East, Buddhism, a term you've already heard used several times by Chris. And so it arrives in Japan, and again, it's an approximate date, the mid-6th century of the Common Era, or AD.
Where'd it come from, China?
It comes from China, yes, and I'll have a few more comments about that, but yeah, that's where it comes from. And so just file away the question and the comment. So Japan is its own country now, and the islands there, its own language and so forth, but it is part of the Asian East. And so there are a number of connections between China and Korea and Japan on these matters. And Buddhism is one of the things that would be shared, differently of course, but shared among those three groups. And then the third one, Confucianism. These are terms I'm sure that you've at least heard of. I say it possibly arrived in Japan in the 3rd century CE. It's hard to know exactly when that took place, but it begins to take root later in the 6th and 7th centuries. So you got the terms, right? All right, Chris, can I hit page down again?
I hope so. Hit it hard. There you go.
You know, I'm so technologically astute that I can get that to work. All right, friends, a few comments here. So what are some of the characteristics of Shinto? Veneration of the kami. Put that in bold there. The kami are divinized spirits present in creation. Think of it this way, sort of a generic description. The world has got lots of powers and influences in it. How do you characterize those? And they can be thought of as divine powers. It may be that these spirits are thought of as deities, but they're certainly influential in the life of the human community and in creation. You have thunderstorms. You have the fertility of crops. How do you account for that? It's thought of as part of a religious profile. And so to be in harmony with nature and human community, one honors these powers and purifies oneself in dedication to them through various kinds of ritual actions. Next bullet point is pretty important for a variety of reasons. And think about what Chris said in terms of the no text for the hidden Christians. There aren't any sacred texts in Shintoism. So how do you learn it? You do what mom and dad do, or your neighbors. There's no communal worship, a huge cultural profile. Now just pause for a moment. Get up on Sunday morning, what are you going to do? I'm going to church. It's something we do corporately. Now, of course, theologically, you go to church, but we are the church. But there is no regular communal worship. So it gives a big profile to the culture. So it's person and family centered. It's well integrated with national festivals. They could have a Thanksgiving. They could have a Boxer's Day. They could have any kinds of things. And so you have birth, death, marriage, and families. These are all integrated in Shinto culture. And there are ritual practices for all aspects of this life. So one more point about the comment, no regular communal worship. So if you are doing something explicit about your faith or your integration into culture, where do you do it? At home, or you can go to a shrine. And so there are lots of shrines, but you don't go there on a Sunday morning or a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning. You go there because a baby girl was born in the family. Somebody got married. You're nervous about your harvest, whatever it might be. And so you go there, try to integrate yourself with, say, the burning of incense, offering of honor, and so forth. So think about that as a profile. So it's person and family centered. There are 80,000 Shinto shrines in Japan today. Please notice how I put it, for individuals to pray. You just show up. And you can pray, you meditate, you present offerings. I don't know how widespread this is, ask Coco or other experts, but in a lot of Japanese homes, you may have something over in the corner. She's nodding her head, so I'm on the right track. You can have a little shrine where you can pause, meditate, offer thanks, and so forth. So that is religion in Shintoism. If you ask somebody in Shintoism how many gods there are, I don't know. What's a god? We've got divine powers that are out there, and they may have personalities, but they're out there, and they're here. Again, a note, some 70% of modern Japanese people practice some form of Shinto rituals. So that gives you a lot of cohesion to the culture. You have 70% of people doing anything. And most of them do not regard their practices as organized religion. It's not organized, we just do it.
Do they give names to these spirits?
Sometimes, yes ma'am, they do. And sometimes they just assume that they're there, and you know, it's in the power, say, of the harvest. So it's a harvest deity or a harvest power, for example,
Okay.
or birth.
It was sort of like the Athenians, they had the unknown god?
Yes, yes, yeah, and the unknown God's known at least a little bit, and we're going to give honor. Okay, just what is a shrine? There are 80,000 of them, so I just picked one off the internet. In all seriousness, so you can see what it's like. Yeah, you can go there whenever you want. And so this is one at Mount Dyson. Excuse me?
It's a pretty small building.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's right. And you can go anytime, and there are opportunities for ritualized behavior, I guess is the way I'd want to put it.
Does the state maintain them? Who maintains them?
I don't know the answer to that, mostly with contributions. And you can have a Shinto clergy as such who are around to help you, but it's not clergy-centered. It is personal interaction centered. Here's an illustration. Yeah, thank God for the internet.
You didn't go over to get these pictures?
I did not go over to get these pictures. Without making too big a deal of this, friends, just look at it carefully. It's one person. She's serious. She's engaged. She's by herself. And you can leave memory or comments there. You can leave gifts. You can stay 5 minutes. You can stay an hour. The term Emma, I hope I've pronounced it right. If I haven't, please forgive me. But written prayers, wishes, dedications at a shrine. Now, we all recognize that kind of practice. How many times if you haven't done it, have your friends gone to a Catholic church and lit a candle? Right? So you can see here the integration of somebody's life in community and their expression of faith. How am I doing on time? I've got like 15 minutes.
Easily.
Oh my goodness.
And if you finish, we'll start the next section here.
Oh, that's right. That's helpful. Thank you. Otherwise, I have to pull out my phone.
Oh, put that on a cruise ship.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
That kind of reminds me of them reading the papers at the temple in Jerusalem where they...
Yes. Oh, yes. That's right. That's right. A tangible thing to memorialize what you did. You want to remember this. You want the powers that be to remember this. All right. Buddhism is one of the great movements in the world. I'll summarize it in a sentence or two. So, Siddhartha Gautama was born in Nepal about the year 563 BC, a long time ago. Buddha, the term means enlightened one. There can be Buddhas in the plural. You can have enlightened figures. Here's the one who made a big splash, literally and figuratively. His teaching spread throughout East Asia, back to the question that was asked a moment ago. And so other enlightened figures emerged in Asia. Now, following again on that good question from a moment ago, second bullet point, how did it get to Japan? Via Korea, 1,000 years later, and I'll use a term that Chris used a lot, trade. The Japanese and the Koreans, not that far apart geographically, and they like to trade. And so one of the things that filtered through Korea to Japan is Buddhism. A couple of statements there about it. It's a spiritual path for transcending the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, to which all beings are subject. All beings are subject to that. These things result from the consequence incurred by one's karma, a term many of you have heard, the sum of good and bad that accumulates over many lives. So it's a revolving cycle. And the perfect state of transcendent knowledge is achieved in nirvana, a term many of you will have heard as well. If you achieve nirvana, then you're not subject to the endless rebirth of things and thus suffering, which is a constituent part of our existence. Stuff happens. We all know that. All right, many schools and denominations in Buddhism, and so I don't have the expertise and we don't have the time, but as you might imagine, what people call Japanese Buddhism will differ considerably from what you might experience, say, in Korea or China, or for that matter, United States or Canada. We have different denominations, and so does Buddhism. Broad spread. The end of that last bullet point, so Japanese Buddhism is less centered on philosophy as such, speculation in a good sense. It doesn't have much on the study of sacred texts, and as you might imagine, from the influence of Shintoism. The main thing is the study of sacred texts. I mean, it's not the study of sacred texts, but more on ethics and family rituals. Got the pattern, friends? Okay, so remarkable element in terms of history, initial tensions, as you might imagine. Because Chris will talk about severe tensions between Christianity and the culture. So there were some tensions between Shintoism, the way things are from the indigenous culture, and allowing Buddhism is. But they began to interact and to coexist and blend. And so the smart people who understand Japanese culture, much more than I do, will say that Japanese culture is a blend of Shintoism, Buddhism, and of course the next one coming, Confucianism. It's intertwined. You think that's fair, Coco? Okay, I took this off the internet and in a couple of books. I just say I'm quoting somebody who knows what they're talking about. So it's integrated Buddhism into ancestor and funerary rites like Shinto does. The Japanese often celebrate life events like weddings, I'm told, in the Shinto shrines, but when it comes time for a funeral, they go to the Buddhist temples. It says that 2/3 of the modern Japanese identify with Buddhism in some sense, but a smaller percentage consider it an organized religion. That's the second time I've mentioned this phrase. So we have this sense, we as Westerners, religion is something that's organized. This culture says religion is something you do in your family, with your friends, and yourself. And we think of religion, well, is there a God or gods? Well, maybe there are gods, yes, but there's all these powers out here to celebrate. So there are 77,000 Buddhist temples in Japan today.
And 80,000 Shinto.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Chris, for emphasizing that point. Let's do the math. 80,000 Shinto shrines, 77,000 Buddhist temples. Okay? That's a lot of buildings. Now, yeah. Think of it this way also. And Buddhist temples don't have regular services either. You don't go to the Buddhist temple at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. You can go there for a variety of reasons. So you got all these shrines, but you have to be motivated, and many people are. You have to be motivated for a particular reason, say in your family or a national holiday, to go there. Now, Buddhists have priests, monks. It's like a monastery. You can consult them, and they can teach you on a variety of things. But you go there, and then you can interact. I don't know anything, and I'm not being facetious, I just don't know anything about Pure Land Buddhism, but that is the phrase to characterize the primary form or the popular form of Buddhism in Japan. And it's centered on a figure known as the Amida Buddha. I can't spell it, I don't know anything about it, but remember, Buddha is an enlightened figure. So this is not the Buddha who came from China, Gautama. This is another figure who represents immeasurable light and infinite life. Okay, so what does a temple, a Buddhist temple look like? You got people thronging around. Right there is a good example of one. It draws a lot of people who walk by, stop, and so forth.
Souvenir stands.
Souvenir stand, yes. Okay, here is Amida Buddha. So this statue is the largest statue of him in the world. Okay, here's an example, what's called the Golden Temple, northern Kyoto. And I know inquiring minds want to know, yes, that is gold. It's a golden temple, not because of its color, but it has a gold sheet around it. So that tells you something about the emphasis, the impact of Buddhist worship and gathering. All right, Confucianism. It took centuries for Confucianism to take root in Japan. It's a slow process. But it came to have widespread influence on both social life and ethics. So interpreters debate whether Confucianism is a religion or a social code. I won't be able to solve that issue, but this is like the fourth or fifth time I've circled around this issue. It has to do with personal and family perception of things, rather than something that's organized from the top down. Okay, so it comes also from China. Confucius was a person who lived in China, and his hometown, I've actually been to it, and it is quite a place to visit. So there are some characteristics. In Japan, it's a way of life that values loyalty, obedience, respect for parents and ancestors and those in authority. It gives a lot of cohesion and structure in a society. Particularly important would be the respect for ancestors and for your parents. Think of what Chris said a few minutes ago about one of the things that the Japanese thought was very strange about Christianity, that something might be wrong or bad about your parents. They might be in a different place. I mean, how can you even think of that? Since in Japanese culture, your parents may be dead, but you're still united to them in some kind of mystical, spiritual sense. You can burn incense on their behalf, be thankful for them, even when they're gone. So as I note here, there are few Confucian temples in Japan, but where they exist, they function as centers of study and learning. Confucianism is plausibly the most influential, I'll put this in quotes, practical philosophy. It helps interpret the way things are. And if you integrate yourself in Confucianism and Shintoism and Buddhism together, society will be better off and you'll be better off. So anything that comes from the outside that might threaten that or question that may not be received very well, as we shall see. All right, here is a Confucian temple. You can just walk in and out. There's a statue of Confucius, which is there. And there are sages, people whose lives are influential. They may not have written anything, but stories about them are quite influential. And so here's an example of one of those, which is inside the temple that I just showed you. I wish I could say more about the outfit, and I really like the headdress. I want one. But all jokes aside, friends, I do not know the symbolism. I'm going to assume there's quite a bit of symbolism to this. I just don't know it. Okay, a few marks here. Chris, I think I'm coming back to almost to an end here on this section, and we can decide how we go from there. But one thing that marks out Japanese society as Japanese, and not just say it's a part of Asia, is this movement, Shintoism. It's native to Japan and nowhere else. Its lack of creed and canonical texts fundamentally shapes Japanese culture to religion. You don't have to have a Bible or something that approximates it. As I've mentioned a few times, just to reinforce this, there's no communal worship in Shintoism, Buddhism, or Confucianism. say on Flag Day in Japan, you might have all kinds of people at these shrines, but it's not a regular occurrence. Historic religious practices are individual and family-based, well integrated into such things as festivals, holidays, and the family cycle, birth, marriage, death, and so forth. Over the centuries, the Japanese culture produced a remarkable mix of these native traditions with the East Asian movements of Buddhism and Confucianism. I should have got rid of that second mixed in. Where's my proofreader? So historically, the Japanese culture has been resistant, I think that's a fair way to put it, has been resistant to non-East Asian religious traditions. It wouldn't matter. We're talking about Christianity, but you could name something else that would be non-Asian, and I think the resistance would be pretty significant.
We're going to get started on things going in the wrong direction. And you can see why this is going to happen. You've got breadth over depth in terms of the commitment of the people. You have the leaders maybe becoming Christians, maybe not, but trade is the primary reason that they are welcoming the missionaries. You have Buddhist priests lobbying the feudal lords to get rid of this Christian business.
Would that picture up there be people being
It most certainly would.
crucified?
Yes, we are going to and I love this. Coco knows that Charlotte and I are going to Japan in October, and we're going to be 2 weeks. We're going to be all at different ports and places in Japan on a ship, and then go to Taiwan and end up in Hong Kong. She has sent me enough material about the Christian tradition in Nagasaki, her hometown, which really is the sort of ground zero for Christianity in Japan. I could spend all 2 weeks in Nagasaki using Coco's recommendations.
Well, you can come back.
So there you are. Oh yeah, so I thank her. This is actually really a good place to stop. I'm going to talk about this. She gave me, in thanks for teaching this class years ago, a copy of this book, Silence, by Shusak Endo, first published in 1966. And this is a quote from a lovely book also by Makoto Fujimura called Silence and Beauty, in which he's actually reflecting on this book and on Endo's authorship of it. It endures as one of the greatest works of 20th century Japanese literature. Its narrative of the persecution of Christians in 17th century Japan raises uncomfortable questions about God and the ambiguity of faith in the midst of suffering and hostility. There is a movie that was well done, pretty close to the book, starring Andrew Garfield, which you can find on some streaming service somewhere. And you can see it was produced by Martin Scorsese, who is a sincere Catholic fellow. And so this story was meaningful because you've noticed we're all about the Jesuits. These are Catholic missions. We're going to see a little problem when the Franciscans arrive. Guess what? A little competition between the Franciscans and the Jesuits. But the basic storyline of this book, and I'm absolutely going to leave you without the punchline, is during the persecution that we're going to study next week. The first effort was to eliminate, crucify, or by other means kill, make martyrs of the priests. Guess what? The people who witnessed that, who were part of their flock, said, my, they must really believe this. Look at their bravery, look at their courage, look at their faith. So it didn't work. it did not work to cause everybody else to give up the faith. And then we went to plan B. Let's torture the priest, and then let's get the priest to make a public recantation of the faith. And we're going to see next week, and this is one thing I'm really looking forward to, in one of the rooms of the National Museum in Tokyo, they have a collection of what are called fumie, which means to tromp on. They made bronze images of Jesus or Mary holding Jesus, and they would put the priest in front of everybody after torturing them and make them stomp on it to show everybody, no, this is a bunch of baloney. I don't believe. And the story of silence is of a young priest who hears that his mentor and hero has done that, has recanted his faith, has apostatized in Japan, and he just doesn't believe it. And he and a friend go to Japan. Their superiors say, don't do that. You're not allowed. If you get caught, they're going to torture you, kill you. But they do sneak in and discover the truth. And one thing that our young priest says that's central to the book, if that were to happen to me, I would never renounce my faith. I will leave it at that. Read the book. You can read it in a week. Thank you all.